Good day and welcome back to A Bit of Curiosity. As usual, I'm your host, Jeremy Howlett, and today I'm joined by the great Bart Yasso. So, Bart, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, thank you for having me, Jeremy. I don't know about the great part, but I'm here.
Well, referred to as the mayor of running,
Yeah, I
and
still
certainly
get.
iconic in the sport of running, we can call you great.
All right, I'll take it. They still call me the mayor, and even I've been retired for over 7 years, and I still get these titles. But I'm cool with it. Fine by me.
Hey, you may be retired, but I hear they're still bringing you out to races all over the country and the world. So,
Yeah, I get a lot of requests. I don't go to many because I really can't travel anymore like I used to. It was
yeah.
fun and easy, but it took its toll. I really spend more time at home than ever.
Well, you with running's taking you all over the world, literally.
Yes.
How many countries are on your list?
When I counted, I don't know how precise I am. I know for sure that I've run in 54 countries. But every once in a while, I think of another country. I'm like, because originally it was, when I started on the book, it was 51, and then it went to 52. And then every once in a while, I'd find something on an old passport or an old press credential that I had, and they go, I forgot that place. Roughly 50, I mean, I know for sure 54, but I could be a little bit more, but not much more.
That's still quite the list, though, and you've run in all 7 continents, so that's
I have.
impressive.
Yeah, yeah, the
And
seven
a
continents.
race, for that matter. You've raced in all 7 continents.
Yeah, the hard one is going to Antarctica. It is an arduous journey. It takes a while. It's an amazing race, but everyone has to meet up in Buenos Aires, wherever you're coming from, whether it's Utah, Pennsylvania, Prague, wherever. All the runners meet up in Buenos Aires. Then we have a chartered flight to the tip of South America, Tierra del Fuego. And then you get on a Russian freighter for 2.5 to 3 days, depending on how rough the seas are. And then you finally get to Antarctica, and that's harder than the race, to be honest. The seas are rough, and it's
That's what
a
I've heard. I've heard that just getting across that strait there is, yeah, it's challenging.
the Drake Passage. It's known as the roughest seas in the world. Not by us, by people that sail
Yeah.
that are out there, captains of ships, not your everyday citizen saying, that sea was rough." It really is. And then once you get there to Antarctica, I helped set up the course with Tom Gilligan, who was the race director, and we set up the course. And then I did the half when I was there, and you got a choice between a half or a marathon. It was, Antarctica is just this frozen continent, but that's what makes it so mysterious and
Yeah.
it's intriguing, and it is teeming with wildlife. The penguins are everywhere. You can see these penguin colonies, 50,000, 100,000 penguins clinging to a rock in the middle of the Antarctic Ocean. And you're like, God, it's unbelievable. And a lot of whales.
Yeah.
We got to see a lot of whales, which is
Oh,
very cool.
that's awesome. Yeah, I have a buddy that did a cruise to Antarctica this past winter and loved it and sent back some pictures of him and his boy hanging out with lots of penguins.
Yeah. Yeah, and the cruise ship industry to Antarctica is new in the last, it wasn't going on when I went to Antarctica in 99. It became a thing, I believe in early 2000s, like it became
Yeah.
popular. Because they were worried that cruise ships weren't strong enough to survive. Because I'm telling you, the Russian freighter we were on, man, that you get out in those 30-foot swells and you just hear that metal cracking, and you're like, please don't fall apart, because we're days from help,
Yeah.
and you can't survive in that water for minutes. Forget about
No.
days.
Yeah, for sure.
One call to help save us. That was going to be our final resting place. We all knew that, but it scares the daylights out of you. But the captain says the cracking noise is good because that means the metal expands and doesn't. If it was real taut, it would break, but it expands with the swells. I trust he knew what he was talking about.
Well, you made it. So here you are. Here you are to tell the story. So the ocean didn't swallow you up.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, running a race in Antarctica, what like What's your apparel like? Running 13 miles.
Yeah, so that's a question I get all the time. And it's a little bit of mud and rocks and snow and ice and glacier. It's a little bit of every kind of terrain. But it's summertime when they host the race, and a normal summer day in Antarctica is like a pretty hard winter day in Chicago.
Okay, so you're probably
In
10 to 20
Chicago,
degrees Fahrenheit.
yeah, I think the day of the race, maybe it went up to like 5 degrees and a
Okay.
stiff little wind, and yeah. But we had clear, you know, we were on that ship for 2 weeks, and I think we had maybe 10 minutes of sunshine on 2 weeks, and it was light 20 hours a day because it was the summer months in the
Yeah.
southern
Yeah.
hemisphere, and you're so far towards the polar end that the daylight is 20 some hours a day, and it's still you did not need suntan lotion. Never. We never laid out in the sun for not even a minute. It's crazy, but it is. But yeah, you're dressed like a cold winter day in Chicago, and then you deal with the mud, the rocks, the occasional a bird called the skua, which is like the size of a crow and comes die. They're nesting at this time when the race goes on, and they dive at you and scare the daylights out of you. And then we did have some elephant seals that were close to the race course, which is kind of fun because they would just make their little grunting noise when we would run
Yeah.
by. They're not dangerous. The leopard seal is a different scenario. Now we saw leopard seals. I think we saw two, but they're scary. They would love to eat people, and they're big. And you would think an elephant seal is bigger, but then the leopard seal is massive. And when you're walking around like in frozen areas where you're on the frozen part of the Antarctica Ocean, they're
Yeah.
down below watching your shadow, just hoping that you come up one of the holes that they have, but that they come up and surface on top, because then they're going to eat well, and you don't exist anymore, as far as we know. Yeah, it's a beautiful animal, but it's one to be taken from a distance. So I got a beautiful
Yeah.
photo from a distance. That's pretty cool.
Don't go up and pet that one. No.
No, no.
So this hobby, which became a career of running, has taken you all over the globe. Tell us, Bart, like, how did you get into running? How back in the
Yes,
70s, like, tell us, kind of
yeah.
walk us through that
So
story.
I started in the 70s. I was 21, just about to turn 22, and I just wanted to change. I didn't want to just hang out and go to a bar at night and just do stuff I was doing in my 20s. And I said, I'm going to start running in the morning. I had a neighbor that would run, a guy by the name of Dick Metzger. And I'd see him, and he always looked happy. So I said, I'm going to start running. Little did I know I really didn't have running clothes. So I went on that first run with like cutoff jeans and a beat up t shirt and a pair of Keds. And I thought I was a runner, but I made it a mile. And then, I mean, we didn't have all the GPS stuff, but approximately a mile. And then that was it. I fell in love with it right away. Never thinking that I would work at Runner's World and travel the world. I just fell in love with the movement. Felt like I was doing something good for me. Get out in the morning, get a little run in. And as you know, Jeremy, 1 mile leads to 3 miles, and running twice a week leads to running 4 times a week. And then next thing I knew, I was doing 60 miles a week and running 7 days a week. And then eventually 100 miles a week, which was pretty common for marathon runners back in the 70s and early 80s. But it just kept evolving, and you know it just kept growing. And I used to think on my long runs, man, wouldn't it be cool if I could figure out how to get a job in running, and then I could really stay connected with the sport. I knew I was never gonna. I was fortunate enough to win some races, but I knew I was never gonna win any big races and couldn't make a couldn't. I knew I couldn't make a living just on running. So the job at Runner's World was a dream for me. And once I got in that door, I said, I'm going to outwork everyone in this building to progress up the what we called the masthead back in the day, the list of all the employees on the masthead of the magazine. So yeah, and I literally what I used to dream on long runs came true. And I ended up going all over the world. And even when I started at Runner's World, it wasn't like they said, go all over the world or travel. I was traveling to events in the U.S., domestic flight.
Yeah.
But then we really became an international brand. And then next thing I knew, I was all over the place. I loved every second of it. I heard the whole 31 years I was there traveling, they said, "You'll be begging us to take you off the road. You're never going to last another 6 months." And I lasted 31 years and I never asked ever not to go on a trip. Never happened. I embraced all the trips and anything they threw at me to run, like a work assignment was running Badwater when back in the day when Badwater was 146 miles. It went from the lowest point, 282 feet below sea level in Death Valley, to the top of Mount Whitney, which is the highest peak in the contiguous 48 states. And in between, you just run 146 miles in the valley, in the Death Valley, in July. The race when I did it
Yeah.
was
Yep.
the race was always held on the third Wednesday of July because statistical data showed that was the hottest day of the year by stats. All these meteorologists had all these, graphs, and it always peaked right on the third Wednesday in July, over years, not every time. So that's why they picked that date. And then we finished on top of Mount Whitney at 14,500 feet. Again, the highest mountain in the contiguous 48 states.
Yep.
But the crazy thing is, you run 146 miles, the race director's there to greet you at the finish line. Then you have to walk 11 miles off the mountain to where you can get to a vehicle. And I'm not the smartest person, but I knew I had to do that. I knew there wouldn't be like a helicopter come take me off the top of the mountain. But when you're in a race, you're like focused to get to that finish line. So I knew I had to do that part to get after I finished, but I kind of forgot about it. And then when I was up there at the finish line and just chatting with the race director, I remember he looked at me and said, "You better start making your way down so you can get down before sunset." And I'm like, "Oh, it would be no problem." He said, I would start now." And boy, was he right, because I thought I could start running down the hill. There's no way. After 146 miles of running, I was pretty beat up. Uh,
Yeah,
but yeah,
nowadays it's only 135 because they cut
yeah,
off that 11 miles, right?
yeah.
So
They don't go on that trail because that once you get to the what they call the portals and that trailhead, you're now in a national park. And when I
yeah,
did the race back in the 80s, they didn't have a permit in the national park, but the national park didn't care. But then eventually legal things happened, and then they did care. And they just became more protective of all the national parks. Same with
for
like
sure.
people used to do rim to rim to rim in the Grand Canyon as a race. That hasn't happened in many years as a race because the
Right.
national park got involved and said, "No, you're not doing this anymore." In fact, if you do it with a group of a certain amount, you better have a permit. If you're just going to do rim to rim, with a couple friends or whatever, it's common to do. But if you have like a group of 10, the rangers are going to come looking for you.
Yep.
They really are protective, and as they should be. The whole idea of the park is to save the parks, not destroy the parks.
Right. No, it's great to see over the years how much the national parks have increased in popularity and visitation, and especially post COVID, right? Like we saw a
Yeah.
major influx post COVID. Instagram's probably also helped that influx as well.
Yes.
But it is about protecting those spaces, right? We want
Yeah.
to keep those spaces
Absolutely.
for generations to come for sure.
So when I did Badwater in 1989, it was not a national park. It was called a national monument, which was just preserved. There were
Yeah.
no ranger stations. There were no rangers. There were no park facilities. At the start of the race, there was just a sign that said Badwater, 282 feet below sea level. There was one trash can there, and it was chained to that sign so it didn't blow away. And now you go out there, there's a parking lot for like 400 cars, and there's bathrooms everywhere, and there's a boardwalk. I mean, it's insane. I believe it became a national park in 1993. And then, of course, there were ranger stations, and it's changed tremendously.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I I just want to kind of share my story of Bart Yasso. I didn't grow up a running nerd. I ran in high school.
Yeah,
When I started Ultra,
yep,
like two co-founders, Brian and Golden, who you know
yep,
very well as well, both are very big running nerds.
yes.
And
That's
so
in the nicest of
just
ways.
Yeah. And when we started kind of going down the prospect of really early on, Ultra was considered the front runner to sponsor the Runners World Half Marathon.
Yeah.
And so ultimately we negotiated and we locked down that deal. And we beat out some other brands and it was great, right? And so going towards this event, my two partners who were complete running nerds were like, yeah, we get to hang out with Amby Burfoot and we get to hang out with Bart Yasso. And I'm like, I don't even know who any of these guys are. And then I remember showing up at it was one of the pre-run things that we had prior to the Runners World Half, and there was Bart, and there was like 50 women between the ages of 20 and 35, 40, and they were surrounding you.
Yeah.
And you were definitely the big man on campus. You were the king.
Yeah. I don't know how or why. I mean, you're right. I'm not going to lie, but I don't know how or why. I think running just became more social. Like when you guys came along and got involved with the Runners World Half, and we had more women than men in our races. And I'm telling you, just the sport itself just became a more friendly, social sport. And that's why I think I look at these shakeout runs that go on at all the big races now, and there's, you like Boston, Chicago, New York, there's like 50 groups that put on a shakeout run.
Yeah.
That was a Runner's World thing. We were the only people that did it back years ago. I did not coin the phrase shakeout run. I think that was Mark Remy who worked for us. He said, let's call it a shakeout run. But I was one that said, okay, we're going to, I'll use Boston as an example. We're going to Boston Marathon. We got 15 staffers going there. Let's engage with our audience, like not just the expo and that stuff. Like in the morning, what do we have in common? We run. Let's just get the word out. Once the web was there, we could get the word out. Meet here, meet at the Sheridan lobby, and we're going to go for a 3 mile run at an easy pace. We call it a shakeout run, shake out the nerves and cobwebs, and that's why we did it. And now I can't believe what shakeout runs have become. I saw a couple of them. There's like 400 people. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I think like I love what Runner's World was doing at the time, right? And all throughout really the 2000s and probably even back before that, right? But was just that connection that you had, right? Like you think of a lot of like you could go through a lot of top selling magazines and it's like, okay, you may know who the writers are. And but before social media, you didn't know who they were other than what they had written,
Right.
right? Like
Yeah, and I
but with
think
Runner's World, it was like you guys were out there, you were with the people, and a lot of like you also were bringing people in from the sport that were competitive and had made a name for themselves on the running circuit as well. But the ability to like, okay, we're gonna go host a shakeout run, right? Like we're
yeah,
gonna
yeah,
go meet the people where they're at. I think it's such a powerful marketing tool for the brand overall. And you were a key part of all of that.
it was fun to be there. I remember so many different shakeout runs. I remember Strava one time asked me to do one, and they were trying to show off their product, and they asked me to run 3 miles at 10-minute pace. But the only thing was I couldn't wear a watch or have my phone or anything. And I couldn't have a course that I set up because they asked me that morning. And they said, we're going to take you out to here, and then you're going to end at our store, which is, they gave me the address, and I knew where that was. And they said, okay, take this group for 3 miles and take them there in 3 miles and 30 minutes. And then we'll see you at the store. And I'm like, looking at them like, how the heck did I get stuck doing this? Like, I got to figure out the pace and distance. And Strava wanted me to be very close. Turns out we did 30 minutes and 3 seconds, and it was like 3.002 or something like that. The Strava people freaked out. They said, there's something wrong with you. Like, you could not be that accurate. But I remember I was like sweating bullets. It was a cold morning, but I was like, they really put it on me. This is a challenge. And I took it on as a challenge. And I did that with everything I did at Runner's World. Whatever it was, I wanted to, do the best I could do. And, but I always looked at, you have to engage everybody, not just, don't hang out with the elite runners. It is fun to know Meb and, the elites, but it's really the core of our brand was the everyday runner. And I think that's why they called me the Mare running, because I really I knew the elites and was friends with them, but I really dealt with the everyday runner, and I put them on a pedestal because in my eyes, they were training hard and people that don't really look at the sport or don't really pay attention, at races, they think people that finish in the back of the pack just don't train or they don't care, and it's not the case. They could be
No, not at all.
overcoming something that you don't know about. When I do race announcing, I stay to the bitter end, and some of the best stories happen in those last couple of people that are out there, and they are just determined to finish. And then they just break down in tears and share their story. And that was one of the things that always happened to me. People would always share their story. And I never went to like an expo and had a sign, "Hi, I'm Bart Yasso, share your running story." But I didn't need a sign because it happened.
Yeah.
And that's how we came out. There were a lot of feature stories in the magazine that I really didn't work on at all from a writing standpoint. But I came back from a race with the idea. I met the person and I said, "This is a story." And I would just, send to Amby and David Willey and the edit team my idea of, why it would be a great story. And if they felt it was a good story, they would follow up and put a freelancer on it on a feature story because they would work on it for 3 months. And I didn't have
I
that
think a
problem.
big part of that too for you, Bart, is because you've told your story so many times and you have a powerful story, right? Like, I've got your book right here in the background.
Yeah,
So, My Life on the Run,
yeah,
right? So,
that's my memoir.
years ago you wrote that book telling your story, right?
Yeah,
And I think looking at that, you become extremely relatable to everybody from back of the pack to middle of the pack to the elite, right? Like, and I think that resonates really well with a lot of people, and so people feel safe
right.
coming and sharing their story with Bart Yasso, right?
Yeah. No, you hit the nail on the head, Jeremy. When I did My Life on the Run and I had a co-author, Kathleen Parrish, who really helped me, I knew I had to share my story, and I wasn't excited about the low points of my life to share. But you got to share a story. No one wants to read, "Oh, I was really good in school. I was great at this. I was great at that. I won the Boston Marathon, and here I am at Runner's World." That would be like Amby Burfoot. Amby said, "No one would read my book if I wrote a memoir because it doesn't make any sense." But I had the ups and downs, and that's what made the big difference. And I was willing to share my story. And I think you're exactly right. People read that and they said, "Okay, this guy came clean. I'm going to go up and talk to him." And, if someone looks you straight in the face and says, they tried to commit suicide over, whatever was going on in their life and things like that, really, or someone that was really on death's, 4-stage cancers and they survived it. And now they're just happy to put one foot in front of the other. Pace doesn't mean anything to these people. Just being alive is what means to these people. I was at the Tacoma Marathon one year and I was in a bad shape with my Lyme disease. I wasn't running at all. And this guy with stage 4 cancer came up to me and he said, "I'm going to run with you tomorrow." And I was like, "Oh, God, I'm going." So I said, "Okay, I'll catch you at the start." So I ran to the race director. I said, "I got to run the marathon tomorrow. I'm going to meet this guy. He's got stage 4 cancer. It doesn't matter if I haven't run in months. I got to get out there."
I
So
got to I got to go out and get out there. Yeah.
yeah, we ran together for a little bit. We got to one point where his wife was stationed. She went out on the course, took a picture of the two of us, and then I told him, I said, you are much stronger than I am. Like, you gotta run your race, pick it up, and leave me back here. I'll eventually get to that finish line." And he did. He picked it up, beat me by about 20 minutes or so. But it was amazing to just, he kept talking to me. He said, "Your story resonated with me. I want to survive. I got to do this." And it's when someone says that to you, it's really that's the part that no one understood about my job, the emotional part of it. Because if you put yourself out there and you really listen to someone's story and they talk about they go to bed at night thinking they're going to die in their sleep because of stage 4 cancer. And here they are looking you in the eye saying, "I was this person's inspiration." It physically drains you because
Sure.
it
Yeah.
gets to the core and it's tough. And that was one part of my job that I said, I announced my retirement a year in advance, and I told everyone at Runner's World and the HR people and everyone, I'm out of here 1 year from today. And I stuck to it. I was out exactly the date I told them. And I told them, I said, I'm going to be here a year. I will train everybody that wants to do what I've done over the past 31 years. I'll help them and show them how I did it, give them some tips. And I said, but the one thing I can't teach anyone or work with anyone to show them how it's done is the emotional side of it. Like you got to want to do that, and it's got to be real. It's got to be from the heart. And if you don't have it, it's people are going to know it. And I said that's one thing I feel you either have it or you don't. It's not can't take a class. How am I gonna how do I handle somebody coming up to me that has stage 4 cancer? They don't have classes like that. But I had it, and it just helped me tremendously to help these people, talk to them, and also experience their survival and how strong they were. Stuff they did that's just unbelievable to me. People running marathons the day after they got chemo. I'm like, how do you do this? Like they said, well, I talked to my doctor and he said best day if you get your chemo on Friday, you'll have a really good day on Saturday and a really bad day on Sunday. So they'd say, okay, I'll get mine on Friday. I'll run Saturday marathon and then I'll chill out on Sunday and the rest of the week. I'm like, how do these people do it? I'm just amazed. But
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's crazy.
it's the beauty of our sport. Like you can really go out there and show what you can do if you put your mind to it and to inspire others. But you gotta get out there and do it, and you gotta share your story. I have a good friend that survived leukemia and blood clots, and he used to be 300 pounds. My buddy Chris Luck, and he's just a quiet guy. So I tell his story all the time. He never tells his story, but I always tell people when we are in a setting where it's quiet. I say this guy, because they come up to me. I said no, this guy's the story. What he's overcome is unbelievable. He's a six-star finisher, did all the world majors, and I said the stuff I did was years ago. This guy's doing it right now.
Yeah. No, and I loved like running a brand in the running space was phenomenal. It was so much fun because I got to connect with those people. And I
Uh,
sponsored some athletes, right? Like I had some elites that we catered to, we sponsored it, right? But we had an ambassador team of 100, 150 plus people. And those were like the heart. They were the core, right? Like,
yeah,
because
yeah,
we didn't pick our ambassadors based on finish times. We
right,
picked them based on really their impact and their influence, and a lot of times their story.
yeah, yeah,
And we had people like that were 300, 350
yeah, yeah,
pounds, but now they were 180, 175
yeah,
and running 50-mile races, right? Like, and I remember, I'll share a story. So one of the things that really resonated really powerfully with me with Ultra and kind of our like why we did what we did was, so this was one of my first races was in July. It was the Ragnar Wasatch back here in Utah.
yeah, yeah,
And I like the concept of the Ragnar races because anybody can come out and run a relay race.
yeah,
You can come out and run 3 to 5 mile segments 3 to 4 times or whatever, right? Like, and but we had somebody who was a huge believer in our product ever since the day we launched 4 months earlier. And he came up to our booth after the race and came and talking to me. He's like, "Hey, I want you to meet my parents." And then so met his parents. We talked and we fitted him with some shoes. And both his mom and dad walked away with a pair of shoes. And they were not runners. They were not in shape at all, right? Like they were like, "These are going to be great walking shoes. These feel great."
yeah,
And a month or two later, he texted me. He's like, "Hey, dude, do you got a few minutes to talk?" And I'm like, "Sure." And so we got on the phone. He's like, "My dad and my mom both started walking, and then their walk picked up to a jog, and they're now jogging 3 times a week or whatever. And they just texted me the other day that they're signing up to join our Ragnar relay team next summer."
whoa,
And it was like that was like okay, like awesome. We're getting people off the couch into this sport, right? Like, and it's such a cool thing because you can see like whether you're out there running a mile, you're right, your first mile in cutoff jeans and keds, right? Like, Or you're going and doing Badwater, 135 miles from the desert to the Hyatt to near to Whitney Portal, right? Like,
Right, right.
or you're running, or you're running UTMB or whatever, right? Like you're at like it doesn't matter
Yeah,
because there's so many different variations in between, and it doesn't matter if you run a 2:18 marathon or you run a 4:18 marathon.
you're right.
You're out there crushing it, right? And that's what's one of the most powerful things about the sport of running or the activity of running is that there's such variance in it.
Yeah,
And
that's a good.
and there's no like there's rarely any other sport where you can go line up at a rate like you can go line up with the greatest of that sport,
The
right? Like
greatest
you're gonna
world.
go, yeah, like I can go run 100-mile race, right? Or a 50-mile race, and I can line up next to the elite of the elite, right? Like these guys are world renowned. Or I can go at Boston, right? Like, yeah, I might be in a different corral, but I'm running the same event. I'm at the same space as Shalane or whoever, right? Like Meb, whoever, right? Like I'm in this same sphere as these people. I can't go play on the same court with Steph Curry. Like,
No, you're
of
never
course,
gonna
man.
tee off next to Tiger Woods, or
No,
none of that's never gonna happen.
no. But running, I can, right? Like it's so cool. So talk to us a little bit, Bart. I love so your story. So from that first mile in cutoffs
Yeah,
to
yeah,
the time that you went and you're like, okay, I want to go get a job in running. How long was that, and kind of what
yeah.
motivated
So
that? Like,
that was like a 10-year period, and then
okay,
Runner's World got purchased by Rodale, which was
hmm,
in the Lehigh Valley where I was living. Prior to that, Runner's World was out in California. So I actually
okay,
went from Kansas to California and then to Pennsylvania. So when I came to Pennsylvania, I got to meet the editors, and I was part of the running club and part of the local scene. So
okay,
became friends with everyone. And next thing I knew, I was working there, and next thing I knew, I was got these race assignments for work, and it just kept going on and on and on. It just kept, I just gelled with everyone, and that was what I think what I did best is just got along with everyone, and came up with good ideas, and then it just took off. But there was a 10-year gap where I was just, I did mostly local races, but I traveled to some races like Boston and New York and stuff like that. But there wasn't the amount of races back then that there are now. I mean, there are a lot of races to
oh,
choose from, and now they have, the world majors. None of that stuff existed, and there were, back in the '70s, early '80s, the percentage of women at a race were usually like 10% at best. And as you know, that's changed tremendously.
yeah, drastically.
I always say it's the best part of the sport that I've personally witnessed was to see the amount of women that came into the sport. And they weren't coming.
They dominate it now. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
they didn't want to come into the sport because they didn't feel welcomed. And it wasn't the runners themselves. We would love it if women were running the race, but it was more the organization, and people didn't want to be. I remember if you came in over 2 hours and a half marathon, they didn't want to count you as a finisher. Boston Marathon used to stop counting runners finishing 3 hours, 35 minutes, 59 seconds. You finish after that, you're not in the results, you don't count.
Wow.
You go by today's standards, that's about 60 on a good weather day, that's like 58 to 60% of the field would not be counted as a finisher. So when
That's
people
crazy.
tell me how tough Boston hit, I say, you don't know anything about Boston. Let me tell you how, with the old days, it was much, much different.
They'd sell a lot less of those blue and yellow jackets.
Yeah, they didn't exist. There were some hucksters that used to sell T-shirts in the alleys because they were,
Yeah.
weren't allowed to do it, but they literally like a dark alley, and you could get like a Boston Marathon T-shirt for $3 or $5, and then by the second time you washed it, it only fit your cat. You could never wear it again. Those things, you put it in the washer, it would just disintegrate. And that's why they cost $3 back then. But yeah, all that stuff has changed the sport. But yeah, what happened to me at Runner's World, I never dreamed would be possible. And then recently, I just authored a book for National Geographic, which was like, if I could pick a brand to associate with out of anything in the world, National Geographic would be my first choice, and they actually called me and said, "Would you author this book for us?" And had the idea of the book and 100 runs of a lifetime. And I had to act like I wasn't about to faint. I had to put on a strong face to say yes. And yeah, it was literally a dream come true. My older sister said that when I was a kid, I always watched these nature channels, and I'm one of 7 kids, and none of my other siblings wanted to watch those shows. But if I got up early, I was able to, put that channel on and watch, these shows. And they said you were destined to do something with National Geographic from when you were a kid.
So fun. Yeah. I think you're reading my mind here, Bart, because I think that's like the fourth question I was about to ask that you went ahead and answered. You're doing awesome. So here you go. So, okay. So what you've been working on recently, right? Your 100 runs of a lifetime.
Yeah.
Brand new book, just published, right? Available on Amazon. We'll throw it in the show notes for sure. But talk to us a little bit about that. Like, this is a book that's part of a series with National Geographic, right? So you were confined to the 100. You didn't get a
Yes.
choice on that, correct?
Yeah. Oh my God. I wish I could have done 200. Yeah, because I had a lot of races. It was really hard to do. But so basically, they asked me to do it. I said yes. You sign a contract and then you start. First thing I did was try to question you asked me earlier how many countries I've been to. I tried to figure out all the races I've been to based on my passports and press credentials. Because for some reason, at some point, I just started sharing all the press credentials because I was fascinated by it. So I counted 804 press credentials that I had. And I laid them all out by location. So where most people would, starting a book, you would create an outline. I created a map, basically.
Yeah.
So I had to figure out all the places and then all the ones that I highlights. And then the key is, it is called the book. This is the first question I had for National Geographic. The book is 100 runs of a lifetime, not my 100 runs of a lifetime. Because there's I think it's 11 in the book that I haven't run.
I'm impressed that it's only 11.
Yeah.
Like, that's
So
impressive.
I'm and I'm challenging myself to try to do them all if I can. Now, a couple of them, if they have a shorter distance race, I'm going to do the shorter distance race. I'm not nearly as young and as fast and as strong as I used to be.
Sure.
So, and I have no shame in running a shorter distance race at all. I mean, that's but that would still put me in the area and I can accomplish the races. And some of them are easy. Like one of them is the Turkey Trot in Manchester, Connecticut, that Amby has run 62 years in a row.
That's so
You can
crazy.
imagine that.
Yeah.
But I always say how smart Amby is. He picked a race that's 4.7 miles long to run every year instead of like a 50-mile race or a marathon,
Yeah.
which is a lot harder on the body. So I would love to do that race this year.
62 years in a row. That's
Just gotta
crazy.
pick things like that. And I was talking earlier about the rim to rim to rim in the Grand Canyon, going from the South Rim to the North Rim back to the South Rim. I've run in the I run the rim trail and the Kaibab trail, but I've never done the classic rim to rim to rim. I was going to do it one time and it snowed the day before and they closed the park and closed the trails. And then I waited another day and there was more snow. So that's one that keeps me up at night, the rim to rim to rim. I got to do that.
Have you done it at least one direction? Not one direction yet?
No, I haven't even done it all.
Okay.
Yeah. I know when I was there and just ran some of the Kaibab, I was doing a race the next day, so I didn't wear myself out. And but I got to get out there and do it. It's one of those things I wanted to do 45 years ago and should have done it, but it just kind of gets, oh, I'll do it soon or this time or that, and I never did it. So
Well, when you're ready, my wife and I will come do it with you.
all right, that would be awesome.
We'll go
Because
do it.
that's just one of those classic things. And so of the 100 runs, there are 31 of them are not a race, just a run. And of course, that one falls under that category. And in that 31, that's the only one that I haven't done.
Okay, so of the 30 on that list that you have done, what are a couple of your favorites?
So on what
Of the 30 not races.
Yeah, I would say, well, the ones that I accomplished, Stanley Park in Vancouver is a really cool place because I couldn't believe that it was like a minute and a half from my hotel. I was thinking, we didn't have Uber and Lyft when I ran there.
Get a cab, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to get in a cab and go there. And I said, no, it's right down the road. And it's still, you could see that it was a park, but I had no clue once you got in there. It's like, you didn't know that this big city of Vancouver is right there. Like,
It's kind of like Forest Park in Portland a little bit.
yes. And that's another one,
Yeah,
the Wildwood Trail in Forest Park in Portland.
yeah.
I've run that trail, put a lot of miles on that trail. I don't think I've ever strung out the 30 miles straight through, but I've run the
Huh.
30 miles of the trail, running
Yeah.
different directions, when I'm out there for a weekend or so. Yeah, stuff those. And then, of course, the other one on that list is the 22 miles of the Nepali coast in Hawaii,
Oh, yeah.
island of.
So last February, my wife and I went up to the falls.
Oh,
So we
yeah,
only did what, 3-4 miles of the actual
2 miles
coast
out.
trail, right? But
Yeah, 2 miles out back. But then you got up the river to get to the falls. So
correct,
more
yeah.
like two and a half, and it's a rugged 2.5.
Yeah, it's
Right.
and so but one of these days I do want to go back and continue, right? Like go do the full 11,
Yeah, there's
22 out and back, right? But
there's very rare where you have a trail that there's no other way to access it. Like it's just there. You can't
yeah.
swim to it. You can't fly to it. You got to start at that one end and go to it. Because
Yep, you got to
otherwise
start in the Hyena
you're
State
steering
Park
the cliff.
and you got to have a permit if you're going to go the full
Yeah,
11.
now you have to have a permit. In the old days, you didn't have to have a permit.
Plus you have to reserve your parking space exactly 30 days in advance. So be up at 12, what is that? 12 a.m. Hawaiian time so that you can book your park reservation and
That's
then you got to
key. There was never parking there. So when I did it,
yeah.
we got there at 3:30, 4 in the morning. And then there were some parking spaces, and they were kind of sketchy parking spaces.
Yeah, nowadays you can't get in that early.
Right.
So they don't let you in until I think it's 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. I don't remember which, but yeah.
Even to just do the first 2 miles and go up to the waterfall and back is just incredible.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's incredible.
There's nothing like it. It's just incredible. So those would be the high, definitely the Wildwood Trail, definitely the Poly Coast, and rim to rim to rim would just be a dream, obviously.
Yeah. So outside of North America, where's your favorite place to run?
Cape Town, South Africa. For people that have never been to Cape Town, the best description is so you take San Francisco and you got this beautiful bay and this beautiful town wrapping around the bay, and then you could drive 3 hours to Yosemite. But at Cape Town, Table Mountain is the backdrop of the town, so it's like Yosemite is right over your
Right.
shoulder. Not
Yeah.
3 hour drive. Like you can go. Yeah, I'm going to run up to the top of Table Mountain. It's right there. So you got this beautiful city, and then just this setting of Table Mountain is just unbelievable. And they say, occasional that Table Mountain gets a tablecloth when there's low clouds come in. These white clouds go right across the top of the mountain, and they call it the tablecloth. It's impressive. And then you're right, the two oceans come together. The Indian Ocean, Atlantic Ocean. I mean, you got two oceans, you got beautiful bay, you got Table Mountain, and you got a lot of history. 7 miles off the coast is where Nelson Mandela spent a lot of his time
Yeah.
in prison.
Yeah.
Robben Island is called. And you go to Robben Island, and the people that give you the tour were prisoners at one point in their life. They were a prisoner on Robben Island. So for them to come back to Robben Island, that's
Yeah. That's
impressive.
crazy.
Because when they got
Yeah, it
out
is
of Robben
impressive.
Island, when apartheid was abolished and they were freed, they said, we will never go back to Robben Island. And here they are, they're working. But now
Yeah.
they're telling the story. And, I went to Robben Island. I went to Mandela's jail cell. You do a tour and you go right to his jail cell. And they tortured the man. They really did.
No,
The jail cell had a window overlooking this beat up courtyard of piles of rocks and nothing. You couldn't see anything but just broken up rocks. And then the other side of his jail faced the water and Table Mountain and the city of Cape Town. And they just did a little window, a little sliver, all the way up at the ceiling, so he knew what was there if he could see there, but he couldn't.
yeah.
You couldn't get to it. It was like 9 feet off the ground.
So horrific.
So they took basically tortured him because he knew that's Cape Town and Table Mountain and the ocean. And would I rather look at that or this pile of rocks out into the courtyard? So
No, for real.
it's amazing that the guy, coming out of apartheid could be a leader and to not really to try to teach a country, don't hold a grudge, let's accept change and be together. That's
No, his
a
patience,
lot of
long
courage.
suffering, and persistence, like yeah, it is impressive for
Yeah.
sure.
And when I get
So Comrades is down there, right?
Yeah,
So
Comrades is in like the central part of the country and between the town of Durban, which is a coastal town, and then
okay.
Peter Maritzburg, which is the mountain town. And then they switch directions. One year you run downhill, the next year you run uphill. And the stuff that they do, it's just so impressive. They just involve everyone. And when I talk to the black South African runners and ask them, I did ask them what it was like during apartheid to be a runner, and they never felt safe. But they said the only time they felt free and felt like they were part of the community and part of South Africa was when they ran Comrades, because like apartheid was not a thing during the race, like it just didn't exist. White
Mm,
and blacks were all the same, and apartheid was law, like you couldn't associate with blacks if you,
right.
but Comrades you were allowed to. So when I talked to the black South African runners, I told them that if this sport of running can suppress something as evil as apartheid, that's the sport I want to spend the rest of my life doing. And so I promised them I'd be a runner for life. No matter what complications I get from Lyme disease or whatever, I'm gonna stick to the sport the best I can.
What a powerful lesson within the sport, though, right? Like I think we've talked about the equalizing effect of running already, right? As far as being able to line up with the elites. The other interesting thing is, like, I think we look at running as like you talk about, okay, running used to be male dominated, and
Yeah,
now it's very much female dominated. And I'll tell you, any day of the week, any race, my wife would kick my butt. So she would smoke me in at any time and always has, always will. It's never going to
yeah,
change. So even if she were to get both knees replaced, she'd still beat me. There's no question. It's going to happen. But also we're seeing a lot of women in the sport at some of these longer distances not just be first overall female, but to be first overall finisher.
yes,
And that's like watching that is impressive. But then you bring up the comrades experience, right? Of like, okay, whether you're black or white, right? Like running caused all of this prejudice to stop for at least a day, right?
yeah,
Like
like 11
there
hour
was
window that Comrades was.
yeah, there was a moratorium on
Yes,
racism and hatred for this 11 hours, 12-hour period of time, right? Like it's like, okay, here you go.
but it
That it's just phenomenal.
but it has to happen organically. There was no
Yeah.
someone didn't make a speech and say, okay, we're all going to act like we're together and do this and do that. It just happened. And it was the essence of running that made that happen. Just put one foot in front of the other. They all had the same goals. And I think the race, Comrades as a race, was part of that deal because the people of South Africa, all that they wanted you to do was finish. They did not care what the clock said. They don't care if you came in towards the end of the pack. They looked at the leader, the winner of the race, to the very last finisher. They put them on the same platform, and they said, "It's amazing what you did. You've run Comrades." And they still call it a marathon, even though it's 56 miles and 89 kilometers, or 89 kilometers, whichever you go by. And I love
Yeah.
that because they, obviously, if it started in 1921, and they called it a marathon because the marathon was a thing already, but it wasn't. No one realized there'd be marathons in every big city in the world, and
Right.
on what it is. They call it Comrades Marathon. They're sticking there calling it Comrades Marathon. They're not changing anything, and I love that about it. And they don't think
Yeah.
anything of adding distance onto it or subtracting distance. If they say, like when I did it 2010, it was supposed to be an uphill year, but they did a downhill year because they wanted to finish in a stadium which was going to host one of the first World Cup soccer games. And the World Cup was happening 6 days after Comrades. So they said, "Oh yeah, we're gonna do it down here, and then we'll finish in the stadium that we built for the soccer, and it'll hold a bunch of people." And it's like races wouldn't do that in America. Can you imagine going to the Boston Marathon? That Boston Street's cool, but let's like one time finish on Commonwealth Avenue. Which
Yeah.
people would freak out. You would be. I mean, people would go crazy.
Yeah, let's go have everybody finish in TD, right? Like go finish in TD Garden. It's
Yeah,
not gonna happen.
but the South Africans, they don't care, and the way
Yeah.
they switch the courses, it really just it's just about being together and being out there, and the ultimate goal, just get to the finish line, finish that
What a
race.
cool experience though, like finishing in the stadium though. Like how was
Oh,
that?
stadium finish is unbelievable. I was always impressed with a runner by the name of Willie Matolo. He won the New York City Marathon, I believe, in 1993. It was in the early 90s, I know that for sure. And so he grew up under apartheid. He was a black South African. And he won the New York City Marathon. And I was like blown away because I thought, a lot of these people had a really easy life early on and became good runners because they were running ever since childhood. But
Yeah.
when you're a black citizen in South Africa during apartheid, you were never encouraged or supported financially or any kind of way to be a good runner. And he was
Right.
enough to win the New York City Marathon. So, not many people, if you ask them what your favorite runner, would say Willie Matolo, but he would definitely be like in my top three. So when I finished Comrades, you run 56 miles. I was pretty beat up at the time, and I just remember I felt this arm come around me, and I turn around, this tall black South African's looking at me, and it's Willie Matolo. And he's like, "Hey, good job, Bart. You did it." And I'm like, "Oh my God." I was ready to crumble. I told him, I said, if I were to meet anyone at the finish, it would either be Willie Matolo or Mandela. Because Mandela was my idol because I just thought he was the greatest leader.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
being in South Africa, those have been my two choices, and one of them came true. I couldn't believe Willie was there, and he was like,
That's awesome.
he did the race a couple of times, finished second. That tell you how the field is really good. Like here's a guy who won
Yeah.
the New York City Marathon, and he's finishing second at Comrades. So he's obviously a great runner. But I was just in awe that he was so kind to come up to me and thank me, and and I was wiped out.
That's running for you. Like it's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I forget my place in the race, but it was like 14,000 and something something. I mean, I was way in the back. Didn't matter to Willie. He gave me a big hug and put his arm around me. I'm like, wow. He had no idea how I idolized him. I did tell him, but he had no clue that he was like on one of the highest rungs of one of the people that put a Mount Rushmore. He was one to me, and
Oh, that's awesome.
I was just
No, what a cool experience. Like that's
yeah. And
fantastic.
no one said to him, "Hey, when Bart Yasso finishes, go greet him." Like
Right.
he was just around the finish line because he was famous and who he was, but he really took time to come up and talk to me, which I was just blown away.
Yeah.
Still blown away.
So have you run it just the once or have you run it both
I
directions
just
now?
wanted just that one time. I would love to go back. I can't do it. There's no way.
Sure.
You can't run the pace you need to run. I can't run that fast for 5 kilometers because there's a serious cutoff and they don't let you
Okay.
go across the finish line after the cutoff of 12 hours. It used to be 11 hours. Now it's 12 hours. And if you don't get there, they close the gates to the stadium and you're on the outside. It's a serious cutoff, just like an Ironman. Ironman
Yeah.
midnight, 17 hours or whatever it is.
Right.
So it's the same.
Which is so cool to be sitting in it, like talking about like hearing people's stories. Sitting in an Ironman from 11 p.m. to 12 a.m. is such a cool experience.
Yeah,
I when my wife did St. George back in 2010, I went and sat at the finish line just at the end and just to watch, like, because I went to go pick up her bags or whatever, and I was there,
yeah,
and it was such a cool experience to be there for the last 30, 40 minutes, and
Yeah,
watch these people just fight to get over the finish line before they close it down, and
it is
just
emotional, man. It
yeah, it
really,
is.
it's unbelievable. I only did Hawaii once. I qualified for Hawaii Ironman at Ironman Canada, and then did Hawaii like 6 weeks later. And I remember going back to shower, and I said, I got to go down there and watch the last hour of people coming in. And I was so glad I did that.
Yeah.
Grab a cup of coffee and head back there, and oh my God, it's just these people just come in and just they are just beyond ecstatic. They are just so happy that they made it. And comrades,
So what? So funnest race, like who puts on the best race that you've been to, or you can give me a couple of them.
yeah. Races are so hard to organize, and it's so different if you got to transport people. So if you take a race like the Boston Marathon, where they stick to the original course, the point to point, and got to bus everyone out there. God, that's a
Yeah.
brutal undertaking. And Dave McGilvery, who used to be the race director, now I think they call him the course director. I mean, he was really good at organizing. Boston used to do a lot of things right. But then, you run New York and like the same thing. They got to get everyone out there to start the race. And it's just crazy when it's 50,000, over 50,000 people.
Yeah.
I don't know how they can pull it off and to do it safely. Like today, that's part of the deal that we don't see. The runners that are doing the race don't see how these people
Right.
secure and make things safe. That there is no problems. Ever since Boston 2013, running has changed tremendously that way.
Yeah, for sure.
That they can just do stuff that bring all these people in and get us all gathered and safely depart. It's amazing to me. So the big races, I'm in awe on how they do it. But then there's some small races that that are held like Garden of the Gods is 10 miler is one of my favorite races of all time. I just love the Garden of the Gods, the, the sandstone structures that you run next to, and
Yeah, it's a cool little
really put
place.
you in perspective on we're really little things in this big world. Pikes Peak as a backdrop, it's like and Pikes Peak Marathon weekend, man, is that a fun weekend. I've done the marathon couple. No, I've done the marathon once, and I've done the what they call the ascent, the half marathon, a couple times. Saturday, the race is just from Manitou Springs to the top of the mountain. Then they bus you down. Sunday, you run up and run down, and that's the marathon distance from Manitou up Bard Trail and then back down. And I remember when I did the marathon, I was in the early 90s. I was in pretty good shape. And I just remember the rule is on the way down, you have the right of way of the runners coming up. And the BART trail is really narrow. It's very little space to have two-way traffic, but you got to do it. And I remember I would assume this woman just lost her balance or fell, but all of a sudden she was we were going to come face to face together. And I said, okay, I got to bail. So I fell off to the right and tumbled through a bunch of rocks. And thank God I didn't hurt this person. We never made contact. I was able to get out of her way. But I got pretty beat up. And I got to the finish, and I was bloody everywhere on the right side of my body. And I thought, God, I felt like an idiot. I had so much blood running down my arm and leg and shoulder. And they put me in this tent, in the medical tent. And there were like 10 other guys laying on cots, and they were bleeding everywhere. And I thought, oh my God, I'm not that bad at this. This is like awesome. And then And then this woman comes up to me, a medical person, and she says, "Oh, you got a lot of stones and stuff in the cuts. We're gonna do the mercurochrome." And they had like a giant toothbrush, and they said, "We're gonna," she said, "This is really gonna hurt." And I said, "No, it's not." She said, "No, no, this is really gonna hurt." I said,
It's
"No, it's not." I said, "I'm on such a high. You could get out a wire brush, and I wouldn't feel it." And she scrubbed all the stones out, all the scree and stones out of my wounds and everything, and put bandages on them. And then she looked me right in the eye and she said, "Damn, you didn't flinch once." Like she said, "That's unbelievable." She said, "There's guys
that is
here
unbelievable.
flying and they got half the wounds you have." And I said, "I told you, I had so much fun." I said, "Blood, sweat, and tears, literally." I said, "I had them all. Like I didn't feel a thing. Honestly, it was unbelievable." So that
So after that event, did it inspire you to go do Mount Marathon up in Seward?
No, I've been there, and I got to experience a little bit of that course. God, those people are crazy that do that thing. They said there's one part where like people just jump off and they pass you in air. Like if you
Yeah.
stay on the trail, people that have enough guts just like leap out and you see this person go like over your shoulder and they get in front of you by leaping. I'm like, I needed to be young to do that race. I can't.
Brian's done it a couple times, and just watching
Oh
that's
my
like
god.
it's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah. But I do have a trail run in there in the section it is a race, but I put it in where it's just a trail called the Lost Lake Trail, 15 miles, and it's near the Seward area. It's a really pretty trail. And I did it as just a run.
Yeah.
I was in Alaska and the race happened the week before, so I couldn't do the race, but I knew all about it, so I just ran the trail by myself. My friend Mike helped me out. He was living in Anchorage, and he couldn't run it, but he dropped me off and then picked me up at the finish. It was.
Love it. So, what have been some of the biggest lessons that you've learned from running or while running?
Yeah, my tagline I use, never limit where running could take you. I can't believe how powerful the sport is. And I think a lot of people don't, that are new to the sport or haven't been around a long time, don't realize the power of the sport. And that's one thing I really want. People ask me when I was leaving Runner's World, what are you going to do now? What's the last message you want to leave with the running community? I said, well, I want the running community to know how inspiring they are to me and to the community. And there's people that are inspiring that don't know they're inspiring someone. So I always give them an example. I had this letter from a young man that's autistic, and his mom would come to my talks at a race and bring her son, who was didn't really speak, was a real quiet kid and autistic. And you know, I don't understand the autistic spectrum, but we know what goes on. We know it's hard, and so this kid, you know, mom would come, and this kid really tuned into me. But how would I know that a young autistic kid in this audience is wants to be Bart Yasso? Like you don't know that. But this
Yeah.
mom she said, a lot of nights I would sit down with my son and ask him what's going on, how you feeling, can you talk to me, and he wouldn't say a word, and just. And she said one night he started talking, so she started writing everything down. And it was after a race in Virginia that I was at. And he said he wanted to be Bart Yasso, and he just what attracted him the most about being Bart Yasso was after my talks, people would come up to me and want to be with me. And he said, when I go to school, no one wants to be around me because of his autism. So here's this kid just
Yeah.
really tuning into me, and he wanted to be Bart Yasso. Man, when I got that email from the mom on exactly what her son said, I was blown
Yeah.
away. It's
Wow.
really hard
Yeah.
to read because you put yourself. Told him I put myself in his shoes, and like people liked me like when I was in school. I can't imagine like going to school and nobody likes you and no one wants to hang out with you. And this kid been putting up with this his whole life. Said to her I would come down and run a race with the three of them, with mom and her son and me, and we did a race, and the young autistic kid he would leave us behind and then wait for us, sit on the sidewalk and just wait. And he'd say, why are you taking so
Love it.
long? But but
So
the
great.
message he said to me that the mom sent me, it stuck with me because we just
Yeah.
don't know who we inspire, and that's the message I wanted people to know. Like someone doesn't knock on your door and say thanks for the inspiration. You're inspiring someone, and you may never meet that person. I would have never met this person, but working at Runner's World magazine, my email address was on the masthead of the magazine. We had 2 million readers at the time in our heyday, so this
Yeah.
could easily get my email address and say, this is what my son said, and reached out to me to thank me. And, it's just unbelievable. But that letter is so hard. It's still hard for me to read when using his words. But the kid was the greatest closer ever because he said, the last thing he said to his mom was, I want to be Bart Yasso, but I don't want to do all that running crap that he does. And that's what he said. I mean, as I'm in my office reading this email, just crying my eyes out, and then the just way what he said at the very end just brought a smile to my face. It was really He was really a kid. Like that's how a kid would close. The last thing he would say to his mom.
Hilarious.
Yeah, it was, and that was my message. Like, just inspire people. Don't If you try to be inspirational and use the word inspirational on all your social media, that's not how it works. Be yourself. Do what we do better as a community, and you'll inspire people organically. And that's the best part of it. And you may never meet these people. It could be someone that lives on your block, or you see him at church, him or her, or wherever, some kind of social setting, but they're paying attention if you're out there. So that was really my message to everyone when I was retiring. And now I still get to experience it, still going to a few races a year and being part of it.
So powerful. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
And that's the sport.
I can't conclude without asking this question because this is
Yeah,
one
yeah,
of my most curious questions of Bart Yasso.
yeah. The
For
curiosity.
most people, when they train for a marathon, are familiar with this workout called the Yasso
Oh,
800s as the great predictor of like, okay, I can kind of figure out what my marathon time's going to
yeah,
be
yeah.
based on how I run these Yasso 800s. How did you curate this? Like, where did the idea come
Yeah.
from? Like, how did this become a thing?
It really for some reason I liked that workout. 10 times 800, 400-meter recover. Run 3 miles to warm up, do a couple strides, 10 times 800, 400-meter recovery, 3 mile cool down, do some more strides. It was a serious workout. But I love that 10 times 800. I don't know why that was the workout that stuck with me. I would also do 5 times a mile and do 400s, do other distances, but it just seemed that 10 times 800 was the ticket for me. And then this correlation, I didn't realize till later that what I was averaging in the 800 meters in minutes and seconds would correlate with my marathon finish time in hours and minutes. But it was there. And then I was rooming with Amby Perflett, editor of Runner's World at the time, a gentleman who won the Boston Marathon in 1968, a pretty serious runner.
Yep. Yep.
I told him about the workout, and I was heading out to do the workout. We were in Portland, and there's a track right in downtown Portland. And I headed out there, did my workout, came back, and then did a marathon 3 weeks later, and the correlation was exact. And Amby was like, "Oh my God!" He said, "This is like you found a star in the solar system. We got to name him after you." And I said, "Wait a minute, it works for me. I don't know if it works for anyone else." And he said, "Well, he said, send me what you have in your training log, and then I'll take it from there." So I sent him the stuff I had in my training log. He did some investigative work on his own by asking runners, if you were to go out and run 10 times 800, what would you average? He didn't tell them exactly what was going on, and they would get back to him and say, what marathon time have you run recently? So he was collecting the data, and then he ran with it in the magazine. It was in the June issue in 1993. And right after that issue came out, there was this thing called the internet that started. In that same time, or maybe the internet was just a little bit behind that, but we didn't know what the internet
Pretty
would become. Yeah. So that magazine was out there, and I thought, okay, people are going to talk about Yasso 800s. Amby named them after me because I found a star in the solar system, and I found this great track workout. It's going to work for everybody. And, he just said, I have to name him after you because you have an unusual last name. And he said, people are going to remember it because of your last name. And I didn't believe him at all. But he was right.
like this thing's gonna die. It's in one issue of the magazine. It'll die out, right?
That's what I thought. I said, people are going to talk about it for a month, and then the next magazine is going to come out, and whatever in there, they're going to talk about that and forget about the Yasso 800s. But there hasn't been a day in my life since 1993 that someone doesn't ask me about Yasso 800s. I get
32
all
years later, here we
Yeah,
are.
through all the social channels, people message me, and then every once in a while, someone says, someone that had success using the Yasso 800s, they see a thread and they're bashing Yasso 800s and they're saying it doesn't work and all this stuff, and they send me the link and they say, you got to get on here and say it works. And I said, no, I don't. I said, I only ever said it worked for me. I never said any. I said Amby was the one that ran with it. I said I told him what worked for me, so I don't have to defend it at all because it did work for me. But it did work for a lot of people. It didn't work for people that were doing real low mileage. Some people were doing marathons but running 25 miles a week and not
Yeah.
and maybe do speed workout closer to the race and not do build up to speed workout and that kind of stuff. It wouldn't work for them, but it worked for a high percentage of people because I would get a lot of positive messages. But when Amby said about my last name, so before Google, Yahoo was a thing, and he said your name's like Yahoo, like everyone knows Yahoo, and we don't even know what it really is, but it was a search. And then Google came along and he said, I told you, it's your Yasso just like a Google or Yahoo, and people remember it. Like everyone knows Google, and it's turned into a verb. He said that's the Yasso is the same thing. I said, okay, you got a much better vision than I have. Like you're predicting the future here. How the heck? So I don't, I Amby literally is a genius, tested a genius,
Yeah.
and so he really knew what he was doing. I was in shock, to be honest, that I was going to have a workout named after me.
So it's all Amby's fault. There
Yeah,
you go.
I can blame him. And every once in a while on the internet, I use emojis to tell people it's funny. I don't, but I'll always say they'll ask me about Yasso 800s, a question about it, and I'll say, okay, if the Yasso 800s work for you, yes, they're named after me. If they didn't work for you, they're named after my brother. And then I use a bunch of smiley faces and stuff like that. And they know it. But it is, I turned it into having fun with it instead of, I don't care if people bash it. It's never bothered me. I don't need to defend it. It's not, but I've always had fun with it, and I always tell people they need to have a workout named after them. Figure out your favorite run, whether it's a threshold or a track workout or whatever, and tie it into your name somehow. And, if you can make it a cool name, that really helps. If you can truncate your name or whatever. And I said, I just have fun with it. And that's what I do. I personally haven't run 10 times 800 with a 400 recovery on a track in 10 years or more than that, 15 years.
Sure.
I mean, I used to do it, but those
Yeah.
days, those days are,
Those days are a little behind you.
yeah.
Well, awesome, Bart. I love your story about how you kind of nailed down to 100. Like that would be extremely hard
Yeah.
to write a book about 100 runs of a lifetime and
When you have
just to
300 friends that are race directors, it's really
yeah.
hard to get down to 100.
Well, and to have run as much as you have and to run around the globe as much as you have, like you talk about all of your press credentials, right? Like I remember, and I hopefully I can find this photo because I'm sure I have this photo and I'll put it in the post when I post this. But I remember getting a tour of Bart Yasso's office
Oh,
at Runners
yeah.
World HQ.
Yeah.
And the number of bibs that you had hanging on your door and through your office, we can see your medals. If you're watching this on video, you can
Yeah.
see all of Bart's
Yeah.
medals
Yeah.
here on the left side.
Yeah.
Yeah, the number of events that you have done, let alone just the epic runs that you've been able to do, would make it extremely hard to say, okay, these are the top 100,
Well,
right? Like, and then to include ones that you haven't ever done yourself, right? Like, okay, this one definitely like rim to rim to rim, right? Like, what an iconic run
how can
that
I leave
has to
that
be in
out?
there.
I could not leave that.
Is the Zion Traverse on your list?
No, no.
Okay,
That's
all
I
right.
heard of that, but I didn't know
So,
much
so
about it.
that was my 50 miler. I throw up air quotes because it wasn't a race, right? But I did that 50 miles, and that talk about a gorgeous course, right? Like phenomenal.
Yeah,
A lot harder than you would think
I
it is.
yeah.
It was brutal. Um, but when you're ready to do rim to rim to rim, hit me up. Let's go
All
do
right,
it.
I'll do that, Jeremy.
I think a year from right now would probably be a good time to go, or we could go in October, November timeframe. Obviously, we don't want to go in the summertime, but
Yeah,
my
summertime.
wife and I are game.
Yeah, summertime. There's too many people on the trail. It's crazy, right?
Well, and it gets hot down at the bottom. It gets really hot at the bottom.
Okay.
So,
All right.
yeah.
I'll reach out to you.
Okay. So, what's next? Like, are you out promoting the book right now? Is that what you're up
Yeah,
to?
I've been. I went to a couple small races locally. I was at the running store that we have in Bethlehem, the Aardvark running store, which you're familiar with.
Yep.
I was there.
Yep.
Sold every book that we had. I mean, it was their
Great.
books. They bought them. I just signed them, but I signed every book they had. They sold everything that they had in inventory, so it was quite a success. And I'm gonna reach out to them, do another signing, and then just do a lot of interviews like this. It's just easier on my body than traveling. I can't believe that for 31 years I traveled nonstop, and now I really struggle traveling. I really
Yeah.
not easy to do. My legs really. I get off a plane, I can barely walk. It's tough. So I'm trying to do as much as I can through Zooms and then
Sure.
stuff that I can drive to. It's easy to get to. I can drive.
Well, just keep moving. Stay a little
Yeah,
active.
yeah. Oh yeah. I ran 3 miles this morning, first run in a
So
while. So I
great.
felt good to be out there. 3 miles, I can't imagine getting totally jazzed about running 3 miles, but I was totally jazzed this morning when I finished 3 miles. Felt pretty good.
So I know the book just came out, but are you ready to do the next 100?
Yeah, the 100 series. I think they're gonna just stick to that 100, but I don't know how I could. I think I'm. It's really hard to do a book. I mean, it was a lot of work. My house,
Sure. Yeah.
the home I live in was built in 1749. 1749, they didn't design homes. Said, "Oh, this will be a perfect place to do a in-home office, work from home office." They weren't talking about that in 1749. So I wrote everything. I'm in what I call the perch. It's like a little cutout on the second floor, and I got a nice view of the mountain that we ran a trail run on. You
Nice.
guys are familiar with,
Yeah.
which is
Yep.
right here. So I got a nice view of the mountain, but it's not really an office. So this is where I knocked out the manuscript, and I'm telling you, it's a lot of work. So I don't know what will happen in the future, but I'm just happy this book is out there, and I'm doing the best to promote it, doing the best I can.
Great. Well, I'm excited to get a copy. So I got it on order on Amazon, and yeah, order the book. We'll have it in the show notes.
Generally.
Um, yeah, 100 runs of a lifetime. Excited. All right, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate, yeah, learning from you, all of your experiences. The impact that you've had on the running community has been phenomenal. I can attest, it's not the same without Bart Yasso. That's for
Oh,
sure.
thank you.
You have spread the love of running so far and wide. I think there's a lot of people that run because of you, whether they know it or not. And yeah, thank you for your direct impact on this sport and indirect impact. So
Thank you.
thank you, Bart. Thank you, everybody, for joining A Bit of Curiosity. Appreciate it. So hope you enjoyed this episode and tune in next time.